Did you know that we live in a world where if something isn't shared, it almost doesn't exist anymore? Every rehearsed smile in front of the mirror, every plate of food, every moment that was supposed to stay ours, they all end up on a screen, turned into a performance. But behind this flood of images lies an uncomfortable truth that no one really talks about. Because the world tells you to be seen, but it never tells you what that visibility costs. We show only what we think the world will love. And with every post, with every little story, we trade a piece of our peace for a second of validation. Yet somewhere out there, there are people who have stepped out of this race. Quiet, unseen, different. They don't fill their feeds. They don't document their days. And precisely because of that, they are the ones who hold real power. They don't stay silent because they can't post. They stay silent because they know exactly what it costs. They've realized that every photo you offer to the world is a fragment of yourself you place into someone else's hands. And they refuse to sell themselves that cheap. Here's where the mind starts to freeze for a moment, because no one ever taught us that silence could mean intelligence. We've confused presence with exposure. We've mistaken noise for meaning. But these people have chosen another path. They live not to prove, but to experience. They breathe without needing an audience. Think about it for a second. In a world where everyone is running to be seen, is the one who stays unseen really falling behind? Or maybe they're the only one who has already arrived. They've understood something that most people ignore, that invisibility is not weakness. It's awareness. It's freedom. It's the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs applause to exist. In the next few minutes, you'll see why this silence is not emptiness at all. It's strength. Because to choose not to expose yourself in a time when everyone else is screaming for attention, that's rebellion. That's intelligence in its purest form. And yet, there's a secret buried inside this choice. One that most people never notice. It's the kind of secret that only those who are tired of pretending can feel. The moment you understand it, something changes forever. Because once you truly grasp what it means to be unseen, you'll never look at yourself the same way again. Maybe it's time to ask yourself, do you share your life to connect or just to be seen? Because the answer might reveal more about you than any picture ever could. And right here, right at this moment, the danger begins. Because from now on, every time you reach for your phone, a small voice inside you will whisper, "What am I giving away this time?" Stay with me. We're only at the beginning. And the truth that's coming next might just change the way you see the entire digital world and yourself. They say that long ago, there was a king who built a mirror made of pure silver so he could look at himself every morning. At first, it was harmless, just a way to admire his face. But over time, something strange happened. The mirror spread across the palace, then across the kingdom. Every person wanted to see their reflection, to adjust it, to perfect it, until the entire land became obsessed with their own image. One day, an old monk walked into the court. He saw the king staring at his reflection for hours and said, "All these faces you're looking at are made of light. None of them are truly yours." The king laughed. "Then where is my real face?" The monk smiled and said, "You'll find it the moment you put the mirror down and still feel like yourself." Centuries have passed, but we're living that same story. Only our mirrors have changed. They're smaller now, brighter, digital. Every time we lift our phones to capture a picture, we're not photographing ourselves. We're photographing the reflection of a reflection, a copy of a copy until the original gets lost. Those who stop playing that game, those who choose to stay unseen, are like that monk. They've understood that the more you perform your life, the less of it remains yours. And here's the irony. In their silence, there's a depth most people will never touch. Because when everyone else screams to be noticed, the quiet ones start to shine. Society calls them withdrawn, distant, antisocial. But maybe they're the ones closest to something real. They're not avoiding the world. They're reclaiming it. They live moments without needing to prove them. They let their memories breathe instead of turning them into content. And now science is beginning to echo the same truth that philosophy whispered centuries ago. A new study reveals that when you live a moment without recording it, your brain remembers 5 times more details. The colors, the sounds, the emotions. It's as if presence itself deepens when you stop trying to capture it. Every time you choose to live instead of post, you strengthen the part of your mind that truly feels. That's why people who don't share everything often seem more grounded, more aware, more alive. Because they live their experiences through their senses, not through a lens. They're not chasing the perfect shot, they're chasing the perfect moment. And the truth is, those two are never the same. Have you ever felt that? That sudden urge to take a picture, but something inside whispers, no, this one's just for me. That's not hesitation. That's your soul protecting what's sacred. That's the sound of freedom. Maybe right now someone came to your mind, a person who needs to hear this. Send it to them. Remind them that silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's the only space where something real can grow. If this already makes sense to you, hit like, not for the algorithm, but so I know you're still here, still thinking. And before we move on, let a question linger. Unfinished. If tomorrow all the mirrors shattered, how many people would still recognize their own face? There's an old story from ancient Greece about a sculptor who spent years carving the face of a god. He worked in silence, shaping every detail until the statue looked alive. When he finally finished, people from across the city came to see it. They asked him, "How did you make it so perfect?" He smiled and said, "I didn't add anything. I just removed everything that wasn't the god." That story still whispers a truth we've forgotten. The art of life isn't about adding more. It's about removing what hides who you already are. The same goes for identity in the digital age. We've layered so many filters, opinions, performances on top of ourselves that we no longer know what's real underneath. But those who choose silence, those who choose not to post, are quietly doing what that sculptor did. They're carving their true self back out of the stone. Psychologically, there's a name for this. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole by facing who you really are instead of the mask you show the world. And modern psychology confirms it too. The less we depend on external validation, the stronger our sense of self becomes. It's not detachment, it's clarity. It's knowing that your worth doesn't rise and fall with someone else's reaction. Now imagine Van Gogh standing before his canvas. He painted not for an audience, but for himself, in colors that no one understood while he was alive. He didn't post, he didn't perform, he created. And that's why his work still breathes today. Real expression doesn't ask for attention. It just is. Those who stay quiet online are artists of their own presence. They choose depth over noise, experience over display. In a world obsessed with showing, they practice the forgotten art of being. Here's the twist. Your brain rewards you differently depending on why you act. When you post for approval, your brain releases dopamine that fades in seconds. But when you live something fully, truly feel it, your brain releases serotonin, the chemical of long-term fulfillment. That's the quiet high of authenticity. That's the mini reward most people never get to feel anymore. You can test it. Next time something beautiful happens, a sunset, a singing, a laugh, resist the instinct to capture it. Just live it. Notice how it lingers longer, how it feels deeper. That's your mind remembering how to exist. So maybe what we've called missing out all this time isn't missing out at all. Maybe it's returning. And now it's time to reach what I call the golden principle. The idea that everything we've said so far has been leading toward. There's a story I once heard about a monk who was asked what the secret of enlightenment was. He smiled and said, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." People laughed, thinking it was too simple, but that was the point. The truth is never hidden behind complexity. It hides behind the noise we create to avoid seeing it. And that's the golden principle of this entire journey. You don't need to be seen to exist. You need to be present to live. All those who've stepped away from constant exposure have discovered something most of us forgot, that real life isn't performed, it's experienced. That every time you resist the urge to show, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You become the keeper of your own story. The golden rule is simple but powerful. Protect what is sacred. Not everything beautiful must be displayed, because the moment you keep something just for yourself, a memory, a feeling, a truth, you shift from performer to participant, from actor to author. And that's when life starts to feel real again. There's a line I love from Marcus Aurelius: "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Think about that. If your thoughts are always directed outward, toward others' opinions, your soul becomes painted by their colors. But when you turn inward, when you stay still, your own color begins to return. Quietly, naturally, fully yours. So here's your key. Next time you feel the pressure to prove yourself, pause. Take a breath, ask, who am I doing this for? Because the answer to that single question can rewrite your entire story. Right now, you know something that 99% of people don't. You've seen what lies behind the curtain, the system that feeds on your need to be seen. And now you're free to step out of it. But freedom always comes with a question. If you no longer need the world's eyes to exist, who are you then? That's the echo I want to leave in your mind. Not as a doubt, but as a seed. Let it grow in silence, because the story isn't over yet. There comes a moment, a quiet, almost invisible moment, when something inside you begins to shift. You stop reaching for your phone out of habit. You stop measuring your worth in hearts and numbers. At first, it feels strange, even lonely, like standing in a room after the music stops. But then, you start to hear something else. Your own heartbeat, your own thoughts. And that silence becomes the sound of coming back to life. Transformation never looks heroic while it's happening. It begins as loss. The loss of attention, the loss of noise, the loss of constant proof that you exist. But from that emptiness, something powerful starts to grow. Like a forest after fire, life returns quietly, stronger than before. Those who choose not to post don't just disappear, they evolve. They trade visibility for vision. They move from being watched to truly seeing. And in that shift, something ancient reawakens. A kind of self that doesn't depend on witnesses to breathe. It's like stepping out of a storm into clear morning air. You're covered in ash, maybe scarred, but your eyes see differently now. You realize that the whole time you were chasing light, it was inside you. And the moment you stop trying to prove your existence, you begin to live it. There's a strange peace in no longer needing to announce your joy. You start laughing without thinking about how it looks. You start walking without wondering who's watching. You eat, travel, dream, simply because it feels right, not because someone might approve. And that right there is rebirth. Pain in its own way becomes the teacher, because without the noise, you begin to feel again, fully, deeply. You realize that every moment you refused to post was a moment you truly owned, and that the world's silence about you is not a punishment, it's a gift. It's the space where you rebuild yourself, layer by layer, breath by breath. You stop existing as an image and start existing as a soul. But here's where the story bends again, because just when you think you've reached peace, another secret starts to whisper beneath it. A secret about what it really means to vanish and what remains when you do. In every story, there's a moment when light and shadow meet, not to fight, but to understand each other. That's where we are now, because after everything, this was never just about social media. It was about you, about what you choose to reveal and what you choose to keep. The truth is simple, almost poetic. The less you show, the more you feel. The more you protect, the deeper you live. The quiet ones aren't running from the world, they're moving closer to it. Just not through a lens, but through their own eyes. They live in the space where memory replaces performance, where connection isn't built through followers, but through presence. Maybe that's the real luxury of the future. Not having more followers, but having the courage not to need them. Because when you no longer depend on being seen, you start to own something no one can take away. Your peace, your privacy, your time. So here's the practical secret. Something you can do right now. Tonight, when something beautiful happens, a laugh, a sunset, a thought, don't capture it. Keep it. Let it belong only to you. You'll notice it feels different, heavier somehow. That's what real life weighs like. Remember, in a world obsessed with being seen, disappearing has become the rarest art form. And those who master it are the ones who truly live. Think back to that question from the beginning. If no one saw you, would you still feel real? Now you know the answer, because the unseen parts of you are not your absence. They're your essence. They're where your truth lives. Silence isn't the opposite of expression. It's a different kind of voice, one that can't be measured, one that can't be faked. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. So if even for a moment you saw yourself in these words, if a small part of you nodded quietly while listening, remember this, that recognition is the real connection. Because this was never noise. It was a mirror. And what you saw in it was you, unfiltered, unposted, and free. The story doesn't end here. This was just one piece of the puzzle, one step in learning to live without the crowd. There's more. About silence, about identity, about the courage to be invisible in a world that demands visibility. So keep the question alive. Let it echo in the spaces between your thoughts. And when you're ready, come back. The next story will be waiting, quietly, patiently, just like you.